Welcome to the Diesel Podcast presented by DFC Diesel. Derek, welcome back to the Diesel Podcast. It's been a little bit since we chatted, but you're one of the original guests that were on the Diesel Podcast. I think going back to 2016, 2017. So I've known you for quite a while. And you have a really cool project about tearing into a 2025 Cummins that is really going to be insightful. So I appreciate your time today and look forward to seeing what you discovered on the truck and going through the process.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's been a little bit. Usually we're talking about race truck things, but hey, at least we get to talk about some business right now. And I guess for those who don't know me, I'm Derek from DNR Customs. Up in Michigan, we're kind of in the thumb, about an hour north of Detroit, a little south of Port Huron. We kind of specialize in. We've always been known for the Rams, the Cummins platform. So we kind of specialize in just keeping, your modern day pickup on the road. We do a ton of Fords as well, but we're kind of just known, in the racing community for Dodges, which transferred into locally. We just have a pile of Dodges here all the time. So it's been good. And with the crazy all these new trucks that we're going to talk about, the cost of everything is business has been pretty good for us because of the everyone's investing heavily in their older pickup truck.
Yeah, well, that's a huge theme that on some recent episodes, I've been going through with another diesel shop, like some of the problems they see with the 6.7 Power Stroke and the L5P and the 6.7 Cummins, and then that kind of naturally transitions over to why are people buying a 15 or 20-year-old Cummins? Why are they buying a 6.0 7.3 Power Stroke? Why are they buying that LB7? And I think one of the really hot topics is something new comes out, and of course, when an OEM makes changes, we think, well, is it better? Does it address some of the other issues? What's the power going to be? Look at all these new features. Should I go and spend $100,000 plus on this new truck? Or should I buy this maybe clean older one and invest some money into that one and bringing the power level up and doing the maintenance and things like that? And I saw maybe a week or two ago, I think it was a couple weeks ago, you guys had the first 2025 Cummins there at your shop, and you guys were taking a deep dive, a look into it. I think I saw videos with the cab off, and you guys were going through, and I thought, this is really cool. I've got to get Derek on the podcast because it's the first one, and people are going to be curious about this new truck. They've heard about the 8-speed automatics that are replacing the 68 RFE and some other things. So as far as when the truck was there and before you guys got into it, did you drive it a little bit? What were your driving impressions?
Yeah, I drove it quite a bit, almost a solid week before it got up to me, and then I already had some miles on it, and then I drove it pretty much. I beat the heck out of it for a week, empty. Did a little bit of trailering, which we can get to that. And I thought it drove good. It was sporty. Jumping inside of it for those that are known with the dot, know a lot about the Dodges, kind of the same old thing, interior really the same dating back. I mean, almost has the same feel going back into the early fourth gen days. I mean, the seats, the Laramie seats, the interior feels, dated but comfortable. Everything works. It has this one, we had a newer screen in it, and it was fancy, but same old Dodge inside, it was comfortable and it just works. It wasn't the most luxurious version. It was just a Laramie, I think, level 2 or something. It was mediocre, it was good. But initial driving around town, I loved it. It reminded me of a 6.7 Ford, which, if some of your people listening, 6.7 Ford always seems like it's in the right gear, even with the old 6R140 days. You go to slow down or going around a corner and it would just automatically downshift. You'd maybe feel it or you wouldn't, and it just take back off again. Where the 68 RFE days, which we've been dealing with forever, it never seemed like it was in the right gear. It's always lugging. You roll a corner and it's just always a gear high. So I felt like that was my first initial impression. I'm like, wow, this thing's crispy. Mainly because they had it in the right power band.
Would you say that's the biggest difference between that 2025 and any of the previous years, like the more recent ones? Was it the transmission and the feel and it just being set in the right gear? Was the turbo response better, more? Did it feel like it had more power? Was it noticeable? Would you say it's a huge difference?
Well, I think what do we got? They rated them at 430, which isn't a big bump over what they were in 24. So, but I mean, power wise, it just felt crispy. It wasn't like, I'll be honest, did it feel like a new Ford? No. But did it feel way better than a 23 or 24 Dodge that rolls through the shop? Oh yeah. And I think the transmission characteristic, that was the reason why I didn't feel um, like Dodges are really known for a pedal sensitivity, like they're really lazy in the pedal. And I think a lot of it has to do with the transmission, where
Yeah.
this just it felt right. Like the ECU mapping side of things felt really good driving it around normal in town and even getting up onto the highway. Like it felt good. Um, not really too many complaints, just running around, getting, running the parts or even hammering on it. Like it's pretty quick. I did a couple, um, 0 to 60, 0 to not rev limiter, but to 103 mile an hour, basically just cuts you, right? And it ripped pretty good. Did some four-wheel drive boosted launches, and we bettered the time that they said we could do our 0 to 60 times in, of course. So it was fun to drive. I will say that.
What was it like with a trailer behind it?
That's where my mood changed. Ripping around town, getting to the expressway, great. Like it just, again, same thing. It accelerated well, held the gear out. Whether you were in, what was funny is tow haul mode, right? We'd select tow haul mode, go out, and what it would do is, first off, without a trailer on it, it starts off in second gear. Okay. Um, and when you put it in tow haul mode, it starts off in first gear, which is like a 4 point. So first is like a 471 versus second is a 314, which is really close to what a 68 RFE first gear is. So that was like you didn't even know the trailer was there because of the gear ratio really helped you take off. Driving around town, great, crispy, blah blah blah. Like just got onto the highway, great. What I noticed, we headed into a headwind, and I had about maybe 15 to 16,000 pounds. So not really a big load for the truck essentially on a gooseneck. And it thing would not want to get into eighth gear. It was revving out in seventh, 2,200 RPMs or so. And I'm like, man, come on, I'm playing with the pedal a little bit, trying to get it to shift. Cause I felt like the torque I should be able to, that should downshift or not downshift. It should go into eighth. And it wouldn't till I got a ways down the road and it finally going to eighth. But man, as soon as you tip into the throttle or would see like a little load, it would just boom right back into seventh. And it instantly reminded me of my 2018 Ison truck that if it seen a overpass coming, it would just downshift right into fifth. And I was like, man, really? So I fought that for about 45 minutes. Turned around. We tried no tow haul mode. We didn't have a headwind, but kind of the same thing. It would hold eighth a little bit more heading back. I went from 70 mile an hour all the way up to 82 miles an hour, and it literally it liked seventh gear. It did not want, as soon as you tip into the throttle to try to either accelerate to pass or just go a little faster, it would just instantly clip down into seventh. And I was like, and I understand it, right? We all come from the background of 68s burning overdrives, right? What do 68s do? They burn overdrives all the time because of that, that low end grunt, low throttle input, low line pressure, everything. But I don't have a lot of knowledge about the ZF. But then after that, I was talking to a bunch of people and they said that transmission is kind of common for that. And in some of the applications that they use that transmission in the gas world now. So that was really the only thing I was really bummed about is that I was like, man, I really wanted to just cruise at, 80 miles an hour and 1850, 1900 RPMs and just clip along. And it really wanted to put me down a gear and put us up into that 2250, 2300 RPM range, which isn't horrible, but I don't know. I was just expecting a little more in that aspect.
Hey, Diesel fans. I wanted to let you guys know that our friends over at Kershaw Knives have a 40% off MSRP code for you. If you go to kershaw.kaiusa.com, use code 25TDP40, get you 40% off MSRP. It's a great way to save some money, get some cool gear if you're in the market for a new EDC knife, something for hunting, fishing, around the job site, around the house. They've got you covered with a bunch of different choices for blade steel, blade shape, different opening mechanisms, different handle designs, and their whole lineup's designed to meet any budget that you might have. So we really appreciate them offering that discount code just for Diesel Podcast listeners. If you're in the market, head on over to kershaw.kaiusa.com and use code 25TDP40 to get 40% off MSRP. That makes sense. I think that whole side of it, I know it's going to be a journey in and of itself as these trucks start to roll out. People buy them. Companies get them, they start to do R&D, and that's going to be kind of the whole focus. But I know with another part of this, like I said, I saw the cab off. You're talking about lifters, talking about other things. Can you walk us through what you guys took off the truck to, inspect, look at, maybe some things that you noticed going through, the engine itself?
Yeah, so we decided to be the only goofballs in the country to take a brand new 2025 truck apart. We wanted to do a little bit more than what we did, but part availability, we couldn't even get I was able to buy one gasket for the whole engine. Other than that, there wasn't nothing available till May. So we wanted to see how if they addressed the lifters. So everyone knows, or not everyone, but 19 to 2024 Ram Cummins, they went away from the tried and true tappet to a lifter. So that's been a huge job for us in the shop. We have probably, I know we've done more than any other shop in the country, flat tappet conversions, basically converting these things back to, the flat tappet from 18 and prior years. So we wanted to know, hey, did they address this or is it the same old thing again? So we decided to get one in here and get it apart. And then all the other cool stuff that we found along the way was just kind of icing on the cake. As far as I got some inside information about 2 days prior that I got some prints from a buddy, like basically seeing what under the valve cover looked like and what the new rocker design was. And I was like, oh boy, I don't think we're going to be able to complete this job. Now knowing that the rockers are changed, we push rod length is different. It's pretty wild once you the way they feed the injectors. I'm sure you've seen some pictures of it, right?
I did. I did on your video, I think. Or
Okay.
I saw part of it.
Yeah, like external injectors, right? When's the last time a Cummins had the injector not under the valve cover?
Yeah.
And glow plugs, wild, right? And
Yeah.
not under the valve cover. And I've had a lot of the videos that we put out, everyone's like, oh, it won't be that big of a deal. The glow plugs are under the valve cover, they're soaked in oil. I'm like, no, that's what it looks like, but it's not. They are literally on the outside of the valve cover. And it was kind of wild because in order to get the valve cover off, you got to pull the injectors out, got to pull all the fuel lines off. I mean, it's extensive. I mean, we usually have a valve cover off on a normal truck in what, half hour, taking your time, finding your tools. No, this was extensive. Um, and when we got it off, I'm not gonna lie, like three of us, we just kind of stood there and looked at it. I was just like, didn't really have much word, like no words. We were just like, wow, this is wildly different. And it was a neat experience just to see all the different changes, how the whole cylinder head is crazy, the way they got the valves sunken in. The injectors, look you have to see in the video, but I mean, heck, they're 3 inches plus longer than the standard 6.7 injector. And it was really cool to see all the differences and not really have much. I'd love to tell you a lot of it more about the injector other than I don't really know. It looks like a 6.7 Ford piezo injector and it's wild. I do know from a little bit of data logging I was able to do, we were running up to about 33,000 PSI of rail pressure versus a standard Cummins. Usually they clip them, 29 was about it, is what they would run them to. Yeah, in the racing world, we can hold more, but so that was something neat to see that it was already out of the box running, upwards of 3,000 or 4,000 PSI more, kind of like what they do with the 6.7 Fords.
There's a lot to unpack there, a lot of different areas. If we start with the lifters that were on the previous model, what does this new one have? Is it the same setup?
Same thing. Unfortunately, so they changed, from what we gather, they changed the cam profile just a little bit. We measured the lift and duration. They changed the cam profile a little bit. It resembles very close to what a Hamilton 178-208 is on the lift and duration. Push rods are a little bit shorter, just almost an inch shorter, and but the lifter itself is pretty much identical from what I can tell. Now I don't know if it's the same manufacturer, but it looks, feels, measures everything the same. It did have some new witness marks on it, which from the earlier years, the witness marks usually told them what manufacturer they were made. So a lot of people don't know this, that in the 19 to 24s, as we know it, there's three different manufacturers of lifters. And that was noted by a ring that would be on the upper portion of the lifter itself. There was either no rings, or there'd be 2 rings or 3 rings. And that was where it was made, and that was it. That's what we found. And then some of them had more failures than others. We've pulled engines apart that had upwards of all 3 in there, but most engines have all the same, if that makes sense. They either have no rings or they'd all have 2. But these ones were distinctively different. The thickness of the ring was different, so I'm assuming they went to a different manufacturer, from what we heard. But the general concept, I would say, is the same. Like it's basically the same thing that we have in 19 to 20 and 19 to 24. It's relatively the same.
So that'll be something with maybe time as these trucks are on the road and you get some in there. Maybe it won't be so much of an issue. Maybe it will be. It's just jury's going to be out, through time and experience, if that's still an issue that can plague these fifth gens.
Yeah. I did hear some inside reports on they are seeing less failures, I guess, in testing. They're seeing less failures than they had previous, but nobody spit out any numbers at me. The cabin chassis models are seeing a little bit more failures. I don't know why, when the only difference, check my note, the only difference is the compression ratio, basically between the two. Cabin chassis is like 18.3 and the pickup is 16 to 1.
The other thing with the glow plugs you mentioned, and this is kind of fresh in my mind from talking about L5Ps recently and their ceramic glow plugs and some issues that can happen with them. Do you know what kind of material the 6.7 Cummins glow plugs are made out of?
No, all I know is they almost look identical to shape, size, and length as a 6.7 Ford, except they're a little bit bigger in diameter. They're not as the 6.7 Ford ones are. They're smaller in diameter and a little bit shorter in length. Where the Cummins one is a little bit girthier, just bigger overall. But I wasn't able to get really any data off of them other than, yeah, I wasn't able to get really any data on them. We pulled one out and I was like, oof.
Well, what's your opinion on it going to the glow plug setup versus the grid heater that we're all kind of used to with the Cummins?
It wasn't really that cold. We only had a couple cool days. I would say maybe like 28 or 30 around here. So the one thing nice I noticed, as soon as I would turn the truck on, typically as soon as the screen would come on, the light would come on for a split second. It's ready to go. So that's one thing nice with the Duramax in a Ford. Like there isn't a 15 to 20-second wait time, right? So I think that was nice. And I don't know. I don't hate it, but I hate how they're kind of located, and getting to it in 5 years, I'm worried. You know what I mean? Like I'm looking at, man, if we can't get these things out, like what's gonna happen? Are we gonna be doing head jobs now on these, or you just leave it, or is there gonna be, glow plug kits that you just get rid of it? You know what I'm saying? I don't know. It's gonna be. I don't really like where the injector and the glow plug is. They kind of have it covered with this little bit of a shield where if you look at like a Duramax, it's kind of all exposed, out there a little bit more. I do believe being everything's kind of in line under the cowl, maybe we won't have as big an issue is, but I mean it all depends what the customer's using their truck for, right? If they never pop the hood and power wash or what have you, like stuff's gonna get in there. I mean, that's what I worry about.
Yeah. Well, and what's helpful about the perspective that you have is one of the major, I think, concerns people have, and I don't know if it should happen initially, but I think maybe it happens out of necessity or a failure, is labor costs, right? So I think you'd mentioned it took, 30 minutes, maybe it's an hour, say an hour book time to have one of the previous 6.7 Cummins, get the valve cover off, get to the injectors, you're right there. How much more time do you think you're looking at with this new setup to be able to do that?
Well, you can get an injector out pretty quick. So at least the front, at least the front ones. The back ones are going to be a bit of a struggle. I mean, because they basically have an injector hold down. You take off your crankcase breather, and you can get to it pretty quick. Like I would say, you could probably have an injector out of that thing quicker, way quicker than you could a previous year. Honestly, if you knew what you were doing, if they come out. Which they probably will. I don't foresee a problem with that for a while, but I think it will be there. We'll probably have to make an injector puller of some sort at one point in our career moving down the road. But and that's I guess that touching on what you just said, like I feel the demographic of the person that's buying some of these new vehicles, and I guess you can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't feel it's the same person that was buying a Dodge Cummins 10 plus years ago. Um, a lot of people, because just from the comments that I've read on a lot of, the things that I posted, and they're so oblivious to, I don't know, like they're oblivious to like what they've actually changed and what's under the hood. And the person that's buying these $100,000 trucks, I don't know. I don't really think they care. They're just not the old Cummins guys that, that we think of 10 to 15 years ago. That's what really strikes me. And that just goes like how they've made it so easy to change your fuel filters now by bringing both of them into the compartment. Like who wanted to go change their fuel filter on your earlier Ram, your 13 to 24, and lay on your back in your driveway and drip fluid all over your drive shaft and all over your arm? Like, nobody wanted to do that. Even mechanics, we don't want to do that. And the oil filter is an absolute pain. So like making all that stuff easy and accessible, I think they're just appeasing that newer customer that just, hey, I'm going to buy a diesel and I'm going to prove to my wife that I can change my own darn oil in my fuel filters. I don't need to take it to the dealer. Well, they just made this new 25 super easy. You know what I mean? Like anybody that has basic knowledge should be able to change your oil and fuel filters in this thing very easily compared to the older years.
Common question we get from you guys a lot is, hey, I need a diesel engine. I either, I can't wait this long to get one, or normal place I get stuff from it just takes too long, or they don't have the parts in it that I need. Maybe my truck's not stock, or I tow heavy with it. I don't want to go back with just a stock engine. DFC Diesel is a sponsor of the podcast. We worked with them, hand in hand on doing episodes, answering technical questions. They have a complete lineup of Cummins, Duramax, and Power Stroke remanufactured engines that are set to a standard of ISO 9001 2015 standards, which is a huge deal in the aftermarket. And there's certain levels of quality testing, validation that are required for that. So when you get one of those engines, the type of quality that's built behind it with an industry-leading warranty that's really comprehensive. And the other thing with that is, sometimes the options that are out there, it's a basic OEM engine. You want a little bit more. You don't want to have the same failure again. So there's a bunch of different series of engines that they have, from core, street, tow haul, and also the Speed of Air series, which we've covered on the podcast before. There's a lot of really cool benefits to it. And if you have questions about that, reach out to them. If you don't know the type of engine that you're looking for, if you go to dfcdiesel.com, there's a ton of info there. You can send an email or you can reach out to them. Also, they're working with Speed of Air pistons, which it's the only piston that pays for itself. And there's a lot of really cool technology behind it. So you can add that into your build and be able to get better fuel economy, increase power, increase torque, and better engine life out of it. Some of the most common engine applications or series of engines that they have with that lead time. A lot of them are in stock or they have really short lead times. So you can check your favorite retailer or go to dfcdiesel.com, check them out, see what's in stock, see what you can get. If you have questions, maybe you want to do something that's outside of the normal series of engines, they have tons of choices for rods, cranks, pistons, valve train upgrades, tons of different things. So if you're in the market, definitely make sure and head on over and check them out. That's a really good point that I've never connected that dot or thought of it like that. But I can see from a corporate standpoint, from a business standpoint, why you'd want to have your product appeal towards, well, in a different way than say like the old days with a 12 valve or a 5.9 common rail. And I can't tell you how many friends I have that would like change a transmission in their driveway or would do all these things where now maybe I have a really nice driveway and I don't want to risk getting oil on it or transmission fluid or just some of these other things where it's just easier to get to and easier to deal with.
Hmm. I just think overall that person that they've changed. Like I said, they're just appealing to a different crowd, and I get it. And I think that's, oh, hold on a second. I think that's definitely, definitely changing the game a little bit as far as what manufacturers are doing, trying to make things easier to work on.
You'd mentioned the valve, like seeing and getting some information as far as the valve train and the rockers. What other discoveries did you have on that side of it?
So obviously we didn't talk about the fuel pump. So that's one thing they did address. They went back, they got, we went back to the CP3 from the CP4. That didn't work. So they're calling this new one a CP8, which my Chrysler buddy told me it was an 8.2, but everything I've been reading is an 8. So we'll stick with a CP8, which they addressed. They pin the buckets in there so they won't turn. Like if anyone's familiar with uh, the DCR conversion going on the 6.7 Fords and the CPX and all that, like that's the big failure is the buckets are turning and they're spinning and then everything just goes to heck and makes a big mess. So they addressed that. All the notes that I got is they addressed all issues with the CP4. That was what I was told by a tech. So that was, we'll see how it goes. I mean, hopefully that was a permanent fix across the board, and we're not seeing CP3 conversions on these things in a year and a half like we did, the earlier year. If we touch back a little bit on the ride quality, because I missed that when we were talking about riding. So I already checked all the specs on the coil because this was a 2500 coil spring truck. The truck felt more stable. I have a 21, same identical truck. The truck just felt more stable, and I haven't figured out what they changed yet. Like, because I looked up the part number for the coil spring, the anti-roll bar, all the stuff in the back end is the exact same as my 21. But I tell you what, something felt different. So I don't know if there's some frame rigidity changes. Like, I don't know, but the truck just felt like felt more stable in the back end. We got a bunch of backcountry roads. Like it wasn't really wishy-washy. Like felt good, even with stock shocks on it. So that was something I wanted to hit there because back to just overall drivability, it's nice. Trying to think under the hood. The turbo's all different. The actuator's different. They have an SCR right on the back of the turbo. So like you ain't getting that out to service it unless you're pulling the cab. So that's kind of a little bit of a, because there's gonna be serviceability issues on that down the road. So you're basically getting the cab off because I don't think you're getting it out without it. The downpipe was pretty goofy, like the way they do the SCR and it comes down like, I don't know, it was like they just run the pipe like right down into the exhaust. Like there was no smooth 45 transition. So that was wild. Factory side draft. I don't know if you've seen any of the videos there. Like I kind of did a pretty cool reel. Like, look at buy this and you get a 3,000 horsepower capable cylinder. I thought that was really cool. Because they got rid of the obviously the intake heater and all that. So they did a really nice job, which you can, if you follow us on socials, you can see I got some on there showing the porting and all that. They cast it in between all the years, all your old Cummins heads where your push rods are, basically there's a big cavity in between the push rods. So when we had to modify them in the performance world, we'd have to go in there and some guys would weld them up, or you JB weld them, or you'd epoxy like little domes to it. So that when we put the side drafts on, the air wouldn't cavitate in there. So they did that right from the factory now. Like it's very nice. It's got the exact same thing we've been doing in the performance world. They took care of that. The only thing I didn't like, which was in one of my videos, is the way the way they're jamming the exhaust gases back in on the EGR side. Like they shove this tube right down into the airstream. I'm talking they're sending like it's darn near 2 inches around, and they're just blocking like the airflow. So I thought they could have done maybe a little bit better of job with that. It's very weird, because you have all your hot air coming. Well, now it's cool air coming through your intercooler into the intake, and the intake is diverting the air into the head, and literally they just have a roadblock of a pipe sitting right in the middle. And I'm like, it just didn't didn't compute very well why they did that.
I was going to ask you about the intake side of it, how it changed with the glow plugs being in the motor. So I'm glad you brought that up as far as the side mount and the kind of $3,000 side mount that you get with the purchase
Well,
order.
like a lot, there's so the valves, so they literally have like 36 millimeter intake valves. That's what I got in my notes here, which is big. It's like in the perform like it's literally has performance size valves that we were putting in race heads from the factory. So that's why I was throwing some of those numbers out there. Like the thing could make some really good, power, I guess. It has the ability to. Um, what else we got over on that side? It was really simple to work on the intake side. Like it was, to get the intake off and the way they had the fuel rail, everything, like it was like they actually had some thought like on, using a 12 or 13 mil, I forget what it was. I think it was a 13 mil, swivel in there. You could almost get all the bolts out of them without hitting anything. Like you're able to leave the fuel rail on. So that was pretty nice. Like the intake side of the engine, pretty easy to work on. You move over to the exhaust side where the oil filter is a hot mess over there. Like there's a lot going on. I don't really they changed the turbo flange a little bit. That'll be a little bit easier to get off, but I would probably be pulling the cab on to do a lot of things when we have to start servicing these things. To be honest with you, there really wasn't much different on pulling the cab. A couple little connectors. They got cabin heat now coming in a little bit different of a coolant line, but it was about the same thing. It wouldn't take you 10 minutes longer to pull a 25 cab versus a earlier year once you get the hang of it.
A question I want to ask you about that is from a mechanical standpoint, how often would you pull cabs on a 24 and older? Versus what do you think you're going to have to do it on a 25 plus?
Well, obviously we don't know what we're going to see for failures yet. I know once we get the tappet job figured out on the 25s, we'll be pulling the cab. Um, we've been debating here with the guys. I'm doing head gasket jobs on some of these 19 to 24s. I'm trying to get my guys to pull the cab on them. I think we could do a little bit better of a job just because like the fifth gen's like it's not any real different than a fourth gen, but like the grill and everything, like it puts you higher up and you're just, you're leaning even if you're on a top side and everything's way down and the blood ends up rushing to your head and it's kind of a mess. So I think, because we can get a cab up pretty quick. So I think we're gonna start pulling the cab on some of the earlier years. Anything 18 and older, we're pretty proficient at doing just about everything with leaving the cab on. Like if we got to pull a motor out, we're just pulling the front end out of it and we can get it out pretty good. But the new fifth gen front ends, oh God, there's a lot going on there. We like to just leave all that together if we don't have to take it apart.
I don't know how much you may have gotten into the emission systems on it, but does it look the same as far as like with sensors or did anything jump out to you as different or maybe change with the SCR system or
Other
anything like that?
Other than the SCR, a new filter right on the back of the turbo, the rest of the exhaust looked pretty similar. They have the kind of the combination uh, DPF in the front and then your big filter in the back. A lot of that looked the same to the earlier years. I thought I might have seen one different module under there, but it resembled of very similar to a 19 to a 24. It was very similar.
Okay.
Under the hood, obviously they added another module, like all that stuff kind of looked the same the way that, the way they're essentially doing it. So obviously some updated valves and things, but very similar.
And what do you think? Like, I know you probably wish you had more time with the truck, and I'm sure you will in the future when people bring them in, or maybe get a shop truck 25, and the parts are available, so you can really kind of like jump in farther, to it. But what are you thinking? Like, would you be excited about this truck? Not as a diesel shop owner, but as an enthusiast, as a Cummins fan. Are you excited about this truck? Are you kind of waiting to see what happens, maybe for the aftermarket to get involved, and maybe the size of the heads and some of the airflow benefits you talked about? Maybe this thing can easily hit power numbers that it didn't. And I know that the transmission, that's going to be a while. We're not going to know how much power they hold. Maybe it is something that holds 650 horsepower and you don't need a built one. Maybe it's kind of like a 68 where you're getting into built ones kind of quick. So I know that part's not known, but as an enthusiast, are you excited about it?
It's yes and no. I was dead set on ordering a 2025 for a while. Like I was all about it. I'm ordering one. And then when they just kept delaying the release, I ended up picking up a 21 and we did some emissions present tuning on it with a built trans. And I really like driving it. I love driving a built trans 68 with, that has good shift points. Getting into this truck, I really like driving it around empty, but does it make me want to like, is it a game changer? Not really for me overall. And this is just my opinion. Like, um, is there some ECM updates? I think that could help like the trans, the shift strategy, especially while towing, because I'm a towing guy. I don't really drive my pickup back and forth to work. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna hook a trailer up and I'm going to get something. So towing is very important to me. Obviously, getting on the expressway, no real complaints, but I want to set the cruise at 75. And I'm in Michigan. We're pretty well flat here, other than overpasses. So my mindset is I want the truck to grunt a little bit, especially for 1900 RPMs. I want it to do work and pull my skid steer around. You know what I mean? I don't want to be screaming at 2300 RPMs, especially with a light load. Um, but no, I would say I'm excited for the changes, but wasn't game changing enough for me. Like I'm selling my 21, man. I have to sit my butt in this thing, and this is what I have to be driving. And maybe it's some of the looking at the cost, that I'm gonna go spend 100 grand, 90 grand to get a full 100 grand to get a fully loaded one, right? Is it
Right.
really gonna do much more than my 21? And I already got, like I have to do the lifters in that one. Well, now I gotta do the lifters in this one, if that goes out. So that's kind of my take on it. I think it's nice, but it's not nice enough for me to and I'm short and I don't like the new mirrors. So if you ever sat in one, the mirrors are really tall. So when you're sitting in it and you're at an intersection, you go to look over, well, like I kind of gotta reach up a little bit because like the mirror's so tall.
What what was the last Cummins truck that you were really excited about when it first came out? Was it the fourth gens? Was it some of the newer ones? Like which one, when you look back at it, was that one like a lot of you had mostly excitement for?
I would say the fifth gen. I mean, because the fourth gen stuff, I mean, we kind of blinked. They kind of, in 2000 what 10, they kind of released it, right? And then it's just kind of been an ongoing, hey, we're gonna add some differential upgrades, but they really didn't change nothing. You know what I mean? So the fifth gen, 2019 was kind of that year, like, hey, check out our whole new front end. We did some motor stuff, blah, blah, blah. Like we didn't really change a lot, but we just changed the overall look. So I would say I was excited, that 19 to 20 era. Like the fifth gens are nice. Um, a little bit nice features, but if we look back, man, they just really haven't done a lot since that 2010 to 12. Like there just hasn't been. I mean, I think 2012 is one of my favorite years. It's kind of pre-def. Those trucks just did. I drove one for I don't know, 4 or 5 years. You know what I'm saying? Like it was one of my favorite running trucks to just rip around. And you get in a fully loaded Laramie 2012 truck, there ain't much difference jumping into a new one. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they're very similar.
The part that I'm really curious about, where, like, in my mind, I would almost define it as a different generation, is having an 8 speed or just getting rid of the 68 RFE. It could have been any speed they added.
Mhm.
I've never been a fan of it. I've never liked them. I've had one. I just did not like that transmission. And so to me, like, that's what I'm really curious to learn about. How much is different? How much is different with the converter? What about the strategy with it? Does it still have the low line pressure issues like you mentioned? Is it limited by physical space in clutch packs to where it's going to be a nightmare to try to build, or it's going to be like a $4,000 kind of setup to just add two more clutches to it? Is it going to be that kind of route, or is it going to be like, is Ram going to finally have like a transmission that is kind of like the Fords, how they used to be, like the 6R14? I mean, even the 5R110s, like they
Oh,
held a
yeah.
ton of power stock, the 6 speeds, it was just, that's what they were known for.
I think again, I think most people when they jump in them empty are gonna be like, "Wow, this thing's nice." I mean, I have no complaints with it empty. The second gear start, like you don't even know it unless you look at or you set your gauge cluster up so you know that it's taking off in second gear. It actually took me a little bit to figure it out. Like, hey, this thing's we're doing second gear starts. That's pretty cool. And started reading up on it. Um, I think it's going to change the game for a lot of people. But again, I think a lot of people really are going to buy it based on it just doesn't have a 68 RFE that have,
Yeah.
that transmission has let them down in the past, but they have to, it has a lot to live up to, because the ISIN in the HD world and all your hot shot guys, dude, I got guys, they're racking 350 to 550, 600,000 miles on a stock transmission, a hot shot truck. You know what I mean? And those those hot shot drivers, they are not easy on them. You know what I mean? They're those darn things are almost overloaded all the time.
Yeah, well, that
So
was kind of my impression of driving in ASIN was, yeah, it had some quirks to it. Yeah, it had some things I didn't like, but to me, in those past years, if I was going to buy a Ram truck, it was going to be a 3500 with that transmission, and I would live with the things I didn't like
mhm.
because I didn't feel like I was just going to destroy it by driving it or towing with it. And so I'm hopeful that this new one is kind of, I think, something on par with some of the other brands, like Ford and GM, and how their transmissions have been. And I think that in and of itself would be a huge change if you're a Cummins fan, Cummins owner, and you're looking at getting a new truck. Is if you could just start with a better transmission, which people for 20 years have always wanted that. They've always
Yeah.
talked about it. That would be really cool. But we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I first impressions, yes, it's better. Yes, it's nice to drive. And maybe that was just that one with the that I was driving towing, maybe a 3500 dually is going to be different. I don't
Yeah.
really know. Wasn't able to spend a ton of time looking at build sheets on them if they're sending them out the door with all 342s. So that is one thing to note. They went back to the 342 gear. Versus in 19 they went back to the 373 because the 342s were killing 68s because of the overdrive. So I don't know if you get a nicely optioned 373 or 410, dually or 4500, maybe that's going to put that ZF in that sweet spot and it's going to grab eighth gear and just and truck on down the road. I guess we'll find that out soon.
Well, it's really cool to hear your perspective as a professional in this industry and looking at it from the perspective of not just that you love these trucks, it's what you've raced, it's what you drive, but you're looking at it from a business perspective as well, which we're not going to get many other places. If I walked into a dealership and asked the salesperson to tell me about the truck, they're not going to tell me this stuff. Or other kind of videos, they're more promotional as far as, hey, it's brand new, it's the newest, latest, greatest. Go to your nearest Dodge dealer to get one, or Ram
Mhm.
dealer, I should say. So it's really helpful to hear how you look at it and how you perceived the changes with the glow plugs, the injectors, where they're set, how the intake flows in, the EGR, the other components of it, which is what people want to hear. And I know it's still early and all the information isn't out yet, but this, like what you did with this truck and the investigation that you did is the most that I've seen anywhere. So it's really cool to kind of get those perspectives and that insight. I know you guys are going to be busy on them in the future, but if people want to check out like the videos you mentioned and some of the other things you guys have done, how can people find you on YouTube, social media, connect with you guys, ask questions?
The easiest way probably that I've dabbled a little bit is just put in DNR Customs in any of the search bars and any of your favorite, whatever social, if you're on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok or YouTube, like if you just type in, our company name, DNR Customs, it will pop up. And a lot of times if you type in 2025 Ram, we got something that's already on there because there isn't a lot of people posting things other than what you already mentioned, like your sales guy. Like, I was
Yeah.
reading through all these YouTube comments that I posted, a 15-minute video of my thoughts on it, which a lot of things you and I talked about. And you got guys, oh, I just got one. I love it. But then you ask him a question. He's like, well, I was driving a 1500 Ram before this. You know what I mean? Like it's, so it's, again, it's my perspective of a lot of years in the industry. I mean, we have thousands of trucks roll through my shop. So again, this is just my perspective on what I felt like, that we seen all the improvements and some of the things that we didn't like. And, again, at the end of the day, it's just an opinion. I think they put out a great product, but, time will only tell. Like, is that ZF really gonna make everyone happy? I hope so. I mean, we deserve it.
Yeah. Well, it's been a challenge since like 1989, really. With if you
Yeah.
think about them, I mean, there's aftermarket options for them
Yeah.
for sure, and they can be upgraded to hold pretty much anything you want. But yeah, it's been a long time coming. Well, I appreciate the insights on it, and definitely keep me updated. Like if you start seeing things later in the year, next year, whenever it is, if you see trends with them, let me know. I'd love to chat with you again and kind of follow these changes that Ram and Cummins made on the truck and see how it holds up. So I want people to be able to have information that if they're using it to either buy a truck or invest in one, they can listen to somebody who is a professional in the industry, and it's not like you're trying to sell them something. Like they could be in Texas or Florida. They might not drive up to Michigan, to
Yeah.
your shop, but you're trying to give them information to help them, and that's what this podcast is all about, and this conversation. So it's cool to chat with you today, Derek. I mentioned before, I think you're part of that like original diesel podcast release way back in the 2016, 2017, following your UCC stuff, and so it's been cool to see what you and DNR Customs has been doing the last 9 years, and this was a really cool project. Definitely grabbed my attention. It's cool to chat with you again.
Well, yep, I appreciate the opportunity, and we'll definitely keep you in the loop if we figure out some cool info that we didn't know before.
Don't forget, diesel fans, make sure and head on over to kershaw.kaiusa.com. Use code 25TDP40 to get 40% off MSRP. It's a great way to save some money, get some cool gear. If you're in the market for a new EDC knife, something for hunting, fishing, around the job site, around the house, they've got you covered with a bunch of different choices for blade steel, handle design, opening mechanisms. Their whole lineup's really designed to meet any budget that you might have. So if you're in the market, make sure and head on over to their website and use code 25TDP40 for 40% off MSRP. Also want to give a shout out to some of our Patreon supporters: Tyler Lowen at 23 Diesel, Cutter Up Rob, Robert, all of our other Patreon supporters, all of you who subscribe on YouTube, podcast apps, follow us on social media. We appreciate all your support here in year 9 of the Diesel Podcast and look forward to bringing you more of the content that you want to hear in 2025. Till next time, keep the shiny side up.